Battle Cats has many types of units, and the normal cats are some of the most important and first ones that you get. While Titan remains useful for a lot of ELC, and later has some good uses once he becomes Jamiera, generally he and his variants get a bad rap since they're tanks in a game where tanking is, a lot of the time, ineffective, especially the later you are in the game, and also because Jamiera doesn't even have that great of tanking HP. While I really like Jamiera despite his weaknesses, I still see and acknowledge a lot of them. And after literally 5 variations, I think it's fair to say that Battle Cats hates Jamiera. For transparency's sake, technically this is the topic of my first ever Battle Cats video on a previous channel from 2 years ago called Battle Cats Hates Jamiera, though I think I could really remake it and do better, and also Brainwashed Jamiera didn't exist back then. Plus the video is very cringe, please don't watch it. As usual though, before we get into the video, here's a verse from the Bible. Job 1:21. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Low Jamiera. Imagine Jamiera but worse, harder to level, and to get his final form you have to be in Awakening stage. That's him. Low Jamiera has worse stats than Jamiera across the board, like him having 10 less range, 10% less KB chance against non-metals, and 11k less HP and 1k less DPS at max. The only thing he has over Jamiera stat-wise is naturally his faster attack speed, but the main issue with this cat isn't his stats, even though they're really bad. Instead, the main problem with him is simply leveling him. Unlike with normal cats, it's less natural to level Low Jamiera because you have to wait for little cat capsules to be available. Those very capsules have a lot more items you could get instead of just Lils. You have to do Road to Plus stages, which are very hard by the way, and you have to get 60 freaking dupes of said Lil. The only way to make him level to Jamiera is if you decide to spend NP on him. And while with max NP on damage he'd have 1k more DPS than normal Jamiera, he'd still have 4k less HP and all the other stat issues, and you'd be down to 150 NP. Not worth it. His other talents seem interesting, but they're just not worthwhile. Most interestingly, his 30% shield piercing talent for 165 NP, though this assumes that his max with talents 85k HP would be enough to live long enough in order to pierce shields. This of course depends on the stage, as maybe he'll be able to tank for long enough, but for most circumstances, due to Aku enemies generally very high damage and again his horrible range of 140, he's probably gonna die before this can help him. His immunity to weaken for 75 NP makes no sense because this isn't a cat you throw out for high DPS, and even in 4-star you'd have Cyborg. As for his resistance against Surge, due to his non-resistance against Aku, his HP which is under 100k and his 6 movement speed, this will probably barely help you. I can only see him maybe being used in 4-star if you really need a Jamiera like cat, but for 1, those situations don't arise often, and for 2, you still need to get plus 60, beat all the road plus stages, and spend 250 NP just to buff up his stats to be kind of like Jamiera, even though he still has other stats that are just worse than him. It would have made more sense if he costed less, maybe 1.2k or even 1kc, if he was faster, and if he had maybe a resistant talent against specific enemies like Aku so he could be like a special row cat. Unfortunately, this isn't the version of Low Jamiera that we got, and it's safe to say that if you can use normal Jamiera, then you should over this little variant. Wrestling Cat. While technically not in the Jamiera family, I still think that it makes sense to talk about her because she's heavily based off of the other Titan variants, and she's a non-gacha seasonal rare that anyone could get. Wrestling Cat at max has 53k HP, 3.2k DPS, and she attacks very slightly slower than Jamiera as her attack animation is 8 frames longer. Jamiera on her same level, that being 50, has 1k more HP and basically double the DPS, though the main strength of Wrestling is the fact that she's strong against red. With this in mind, her DPS becomes 4.8k, which isn't much, but her HP becomes 107k, and she has a 20-second cooldown, which is slightly less than Jamiera's. With her immunity to freeze, she can also counter occasional enemies like CTO Seal or other enemies that have freeze abilities. These stats are alright earlier on in the game, but when you get later into it, her inability to gain plus levels, unlike her other variants, leaves her to be very underpowered in comparison to them, especially when it comes to DPS, as while cats like Jamiera and Manic have very high DPS values, she caps out at only 4.8k. On top of this, like the other variants, she's overpriced at 1935C. There is reason to use her assuming you're earlier in the game, you're on 4-star, you're fighting reds, and you didn't buff up Low Jamiera, which, let's be honest, nobody ever does that, but nonetheless, she's still at best underwhelming. Jamiera. This will be your first tanker, and for the time, he's pretty good at it. Remains good up until earlier Stories of Legends, and sometimes he'll be who you need to beat stages in the first place, like for example Flame Caldera, which is where Corey is first introduced. Later though, enemies are more spammed, and their whole thing is doing buttloads of damage to your units instead of just basically chipping. And even though Jamiera has plus levels, he can't keep up because generally 1950C for 89k HP isn't enough. He'll be melted down like butter and he has no resistance or strong against ability against any trait. Him having a high DPS of 11k and an okay movement speed still lets him be useful in more niche scenarios, like ones where he's fighting an enemy with a blind spot and he can tank the damage from the other enemies coming out, if there are other enemies. Though this is kind of hurt when he'll eventually knock back said theoretical enemy, let's say the perfect cyclone for the best case, due to his 30% KB chance against non-metals. This isn't always going to kill his tanking, but sometimes it ruins it a lot. In other scenarios though, like ones where he can tank, his 30% KB chance could still be useful for pushing back enemies if they're encroaching, which has actually been pretty nice for me in some scenarios. Though, in situations where KB would be nice, the enemies are probably gaining ground due to their own high damage, i.e. high damage Jamiera probably can't take. His main issue is the fact that he costs 1950C and he's a light tank with only 89k HP and no other niche ability, making him a strictly generalist tanker. The game later on becomes more dependent on specialists, and you'll most likely have better options when dealing with stages that primarily have one kind of enemy instead of the generalist Jamiera. Island only costs 1200 and he has better survivability with 3 knockbacks and 62k HP, speed, and a nice cooldown. And he still has some solid damage with 16k damage per hit or 9k DPS. And hell, Manic has only slightly lower stats at max for only 750C. Both of these units' attack animations are basically instant. They're not even gacha units, they have better cooldowns, and they have a niche against reds because of their strong versatility against them, which I didn't even calculate anything for. As for specialists, someone like Soap against aliens would obviously be way better because of his higher speed, weaken ability, and his behemoth ability, which makes him have even higher HP against obviously behemoths, and especially behemoth aliens. Plus, at level 50, he actually has more HP generally than Jamiera, assuming tanking is your main priority, with also having an insane movement speed of 25, a better recharge time, immunity to slow, and a lower cost at 1200C. If we include gacha non-Ubers, and if damage isn't important, then someone like Ro is similarly powerful competition, not only due to its higher HP of 102k at level 50, but also its resistance against reds and the fact that it naturally costs less at 1425C. You can even get the cost down talent so he only costs 975C if you want, his resist talents against slow and freeze, and even his defense talent, which gives him 123k HP at level 50. Once Jamiera stops being useful, you'll definitely have other cats that can fill his void if you need to do so, and this problem of replaceability only gets worse as you play the game more. Journalist tanks aren't very good in a game that increasingly relies a lot on specialists, and especially not journalist tanks that have as low HP as Jamiera. Manic Jamiera. At first, like all Craze variants, Manic has higher base stats than his normal counterpart, though his normal one beats him out once they're both maxed. While he beats him out in movement speed, which is 11, he has 4k less HP than Jamiera and 3k less DPS, and a slower attack rate, with both the fore and backswing being more than double Jamiera's despite him not having any idle frames, meaning that once he attacks, he's instantly ready to attack again. This can cause him to miss pretty easily, especially if your cats are pushing sorta hard, though he also has the ability to create a level 10 wave at a 15% chance. If you can do this, it'll deal 23k area attacking damage to basically everything on the board, which is extremely good, though due to its low chance it's not at all dependable. Because Manic has the same strengths and issues as Jamiera, the same cats can easily replace him, assuming damage isn't an important factor like it would be in the perfect Cyclone fight for example. What would have made the most sense for this cat would have been to lower his cost maybe 1150C, give him a few immunities, more speed, and some more HP. That way he would have been at least unique as a fast journalist like tank with solid HP and immunities to maybe things like slow, freeze, and weaken, but again, similarly to low Jamiera, we don't have that version of him, and this is purely speculative. Brainwashed Jamiera. Similarly to other variants of Jamiera, he has the same issues, though his DPS is potentially the highest thanks to his 20% Savage Strike chance. If he hits, then he'll be dealing 55k damage, though it's definitely not dependable as again, it's only a 1 in 4 chance. His speed of 10 is kinda nice, though it doesn't really change much with this usage. His most interesting abilities are his immunities to knockback, weaken, slow, and search, so he's possible to use as firepower against enemies like H-Naw, assuming he can survive the H-Naw in question and tank the other enemies, and he can somewhat fight off either enemies that use surges like Cappy Jr. or just Aku enemies that spam surges. Either way, his HP of 86k similarly to other Jamiera variants isn't enough to fight off most enemies, and most of the time his usage will be niche despite his immunities. It would have made more sense to at least give him freeze immunity so that he could fight off Henry and to increase his Savage Strike chance, but I guess that would have been too powerful according to Ponos or something. A special thing about Brainwashed Jamiera is that these are his stats at level 50. At level 50, he has stats between Jamiera and Manic Jamiera when they're both maxed, which means that if you somehow are lucky enough to get plus levels, let's say at max for sake of the argument, you'd have a unit that has 134k HP, 12.9k DPS, and with Savage Blow, he'd be dealing 86k damage, which is more than a talented can single target damage at level 50. His DPS becomes a bit more than normal Jamiera, and so does his HP, so I guess this probably makes him a bit more worthwhile, but still this will require you to get him 70 more times in the cat capsule for a unit that only appears on limited capsules. You're lucky already if you have a single Brainwashed Jamiera, and these stats are wildly unrealistic to obtain for anyone sane. Conclusion: it's clear that Battlecat still hates Jamiera. They all for the most part have HP under 100k, they cost too much to be used, and while a lot of them have high DPS, it can't be used due to the low HP. The best usage of any of these variants is early game or niche scenarios where they can exploit their high DPS and high enough HP to potentially get into blind spots, or for stages with enemies that don't do much damage. But outside of that, Jamiera and his family remains as lackluster cats that'll continue to not see any use. As usual, join the Discord server, check out my secondary channel where I talk about stories and make comic reviews, and finally, here's a Bible verse to end things off today. Proverbs 11:2. When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with the humble is wisdom. I hope you have a blessed day, everyone, and enjoy yourself.